Good afternoon. Welcome to the Making Your Tech and Cyber Careers Great. Today we have Whitney Phillips sharing mobile penetration testing and how that can help improve your career.
Hi, everyone. My name is Whitney Phillips. Today, I will be presenting on mobile application penetration testing. And then basically, I'm going to go over some tools and things that I've experienced in my career such far. So let's go ahead and get started. So who am I? Well, my name is Whitney Phillips. I'm a security consultant at Trusted Sec. I just started there in June. But I have 12 years of combined IT and information security experience. I first started off my journey as a help desk specialist. This is where I kind of learned my beginning tasks, like learning how to troubleshoot, talking to end users, working through problems. It was good experience. I don't think I would be where I'm at if I didn't have that help desk under my belt. I then moved into system administration. This is where I kind of got my taste of security. I would pick up little applications like their antivirus or their proxy and help them out, help implement that, just to get a deep dive into that security position. After that, I landed my first job in security operations. I ran a SOC at Whirlpool. That one was a lot bigger space. I ran a global encryption project. I ran their antivirus, their DLP, and just a lot bigger space than the credit union, and helped me kind of get an idea of how the blue team runs. After blue team, I moved over to purple team. This is where I did code review and open source, I don't know how to explain it. Basically, open source, making sure that our projects are in the right policy for open source. But didn't like that one too long, so I moved on to being a mobile application penetration tester. My friend had asked me if I wanted to give pen testing a try, and I said, why not? And that's where I've been since. I had my first pen testing job for about 4 years and then moved over to Trusted Sec, where I'm doing mobile and web app now. So, okay, so why are we here? We're here because I want to talk to you guys about mobile pen testing, and maybe you're interested in doing that, and just basically the tools and tools that you'll need to get started with this. So when I start a mobile pen test, I am going to have two things. I'm either going to have my rooted Android device or my jailbroken iPhone. So moving on to our mobile devices. So we first start with a physical phone, the rooted Android. I prefer using Magisk. Magisk is going to give you your root on your Android. I'd go a lot deeper in how Magisk works, but that would be a whole nother talk. And a lot of these tools would be one whole talk. So I'm just giving you a high level overview of things that you can go and find on your way on the internet and learn how to use them, because that's exactly how mobile is right now. We're basically all figuring out how to do everything as it's coming up. So Magisk is going to give you your root. It also has a really nice feature that you can hide jailbreak detection. So it will mask your Magisk as a different, maybe like a calculator app. So when the app sees your phone start up, it won't see you as a rooted device. So after you've rooted your device, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So if you do not have access to a physical device, there are also emulators for Android. These are nice if you don't have that physical device, but you kind of want to play around with mobile testing. You can spin up several different ones Jenny Motion is free. This is what it looks like. So you've got kind of like a virtual machine of your phone. And then on the right-hand side, what that is the logs that you have that you would normally have to print out from or produce yourself. Jenny Motion will do that for you. So instead of going onto a physical phone and pulling those logs, you can just grab them on there. So that's kind of also when I'm doing my testing, I like having my physical phone and a virtual. So my virtual is more of my clean instance. So I can test, well, it works on the virtual, but it doesn't work on my gel or my rooted phone. So I'm sure that there is something on that rooted device that the application is not agreeing with. Another emulation I use is Android Studio. Again, you can use that to install the APKs on there. I like using that as another test bed. So we've talked about Android and the rooted. I'm sure I've said jailbroken a couple of times, but that will be okay, not to confuse you guys. Let's go on to iOS. So iOS, you're going to jailbreak. Android, you're rooting. iOS, you're jailbreaking. The application I like using for iOS is Uncover. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of extra steps that you kind of have to do, but it's understandable. So like I said, with the Magisk, Uncover could be a whole nother talk on how to get your phone jailbroken. And I don't trust the demo gods to allow me to show you how to jailbreak a phone. So Uncover, they've got a lot of good information on how to, a lot of videos as well out there of people jailbreaking that phone. And then Checkran would be your next one. I've not used that one as much, but I thought I would give a good reference, another reference if you don't have access to that Uncover. Right. So I know we touched base a little bit on emulators for Android. iOS has Corellium, but if you're doing this as a, I guess, startup, like you're just trying to learn, you have your own lab, I would not try to purchase that because it is quite expensive and it's more so for a corporate type environment, because it goes off of how many hours that you use on the phone. So it can get kind of pricey, but I just wanted to show an example of emulation for iOS. So we've got our rooted devices, we've got our jailbroken devices. How do we get these applications? Well, you could first start off with, if you're not worried about your identity or anything, you can go to the Google Play Store or the App Store. You can also set up fake accounts for these. I've done that in the past. But if you do not want to put your information in there, we can also go the route of APK peer. So Android uses APKs, and APKs are stored out. People go and take these APKs and store them out on to this site, and then you pull them down, and it is always kind of want to check and make sure that you've got the right one, as you are relying on hackers to put out APKs to a site. So APK Pure is that for your Android. iPhone Cake is often used for your iOS. Now, I just go the method of creating a fake Apple account and using that. And then for my job right now, I don't need to be as sleuthy, so I just use my work email account. So it kind of takes some of the headache of having to make burner phones and fake addresses and all that. So that would be another place where you get your IPA. So now you have your IPA or your APK. What do you do with it? Well, side loading is what you would do to install the application onto the phone. So if you did not use the Google Play Store or the App Store, you would take that application, put it on your desktop, and slide it onto your app or your phone. So with Android, it's super easy. You just do with your APK, you just do ADB install, and the application installs on the phone. Super easy. iOS, again, will be like a whole nother talk that I could do with the jailbreaking. iOS, you have to either use like a FileZa or Xcode and then sign your application. And it's a really long drawn out process. So as you can see why I go to the App Store to get that, it tends to be a little bit easier. So, all right. Now that we've touched base on a little bit on side loading, and you're probably wondering what ADB is, I'm going to move into that. So ADB is a command that you will use for, let me get my screen situated. ADB is a command that I use most often to access my Android device. So this is used in the beginning of the rooting process. You'll need ADB to switch around in the fast boot, and then ADB also to install to access your phone. So it's kind of the first start in Android. So these are the commands that I most live with in Android. ADB shell will be to connect to the device. So when I mean connect to the device, I'm connecting to that device's internal folders. So data folder, your local, any sort of internal folders I'm connecting to. ADB push, that is, you're going to take a file from your PC and you're pushing that to your device. ADB pull, you're taking a file from your device and pulling it to your computer. So when I use ADB pull, a lot of times I'm in an application, I want to go to the application folder, and there's databases that I want to pull from it, or there's I don't know, they might have left something in that app that I found interesting, and I want to pull that information down to my computer so I could look at it. And then ADB install, I did talk about that earlier. That's the side load the application. So all of this is done from my laptop while my phone is connected via USB. There is the option to do it over Wi-Fi, but it's easier for me to have the device connected. So, all right, so moving on, just touching base a little bit more with that ADB shell. This is kind of what your command line would look like. From here, these are all the internal folders that you have. And then on the lower bottom part of the screen shot is the data folder. Those are some examples of how you would see your application look. So the com.android.bluetooth is a quote unquote application. So com.facebook. Whatever, that's going to be the application, and that you would CD, you'd change directories into it. You'd basically just take on the same Linux commands as you're used to. So I like to give that example out. In addition to ADB, we have ADB logcat. So that one kind of gives more of a lower level log of your device, showing application startup. I can use that one to see if there's any issues at the runtime of the device, or if they've got any debugs or settings enabled that I could possibly use to manipulate. These are the different character values that you would see in a logcat. So debug and warnings are never really that good. And I don't use that as much now in this job as I did in my previous job. So that's just what I've got for the Android command line portion of it. So that is, again, is what you're going to need to kind of get a baseline to just be able to interact with that Android device. And the same will go for the emulator too. So you'll connect to that device with an emulator, still use the command line. So we have all this. Now we're like, what do we do? Why are we looking at these mobile apps? Well, I guess it depends on if you're doing it for fun or if you're doing it for your job. You know, what does the client want? Some clients may want to see how secure their app is. A lot of clients that I worked in the previous job wanted to see if there was malware or secret keys or credentials, even lewd comments, because sometimes the developers will leave some really weird stuff in there. URLs, URIs, IP addresses are big, email addresses are big, because that can send you down on a whole another level of OSINT, which I'm not going to touch on today. So we've got our phones, we've got ADB. What tools can we use? I'm going to first start off with MobSF. So MobSF is a dynamic analyst tool and static analysis tool. It is my first go-to of when I first start looking at an app and I pull down that APK and that IPA, this is where I go to. So you can use it both on Android and iOS. Well, you have to set this all up on your computer, but once you've got it set up, it runs pretty well. Gives you a web browser. From there, you just drop your APK into the scan. It will scan it, and then it'll give you this really nice screen where it will show you certificates and permissions. I really like the URLs and the reconnaissance. It kind of gives me a stepping stone of where I should go next, because like when you start doing mobile app testing, you're like, I don't know where I should start. This is always a good place to start. It kind of just gives you that baseline. Here's another picture of this. This is like the permissions area. Dependent upon what your client wants, the permissions area could be beneficial for you in your attack pattern. Obviously, if it's an app that needs to read contacts and stuff, it's not going to be a dangerous thing, but sometimes there are apps that will have a permission that can read every other app's traffic. So that won't be, that's not a good thing. And that's probably something to report on or look into. So again, MobSF, it's definitely one to, even if you wanted to start playing around with apps, I would just definitely get that installed. And that also gives you, if you have zero experience in GitHubs and all that, it's a good one. They've got some good documentation on how to set that up. So after I've hit up MobSF and I've done my static analysis, I will go over to Burp Suite. So originally, I use Burp Suite just for a kind of, okay, there's the traffic and that's it. But now since I've been at Trusted Second, I've been doing more web app. I can do a little bit more playing around with the app and using Burp Suite. But this is also a good tool to use to see what your app goes out to, what URLs it connects to, and basically see how much traffic that one app is sending out and how much data and information your app is sending out. I will go over this a little bit later on in the slide deck, but sometimes applications will block you from using Burp Suite, so you have to use a couple of different tricks to get around and bypass that. So, but we'll go over that. Okay. Next up, now we're going to get a little deeper into the mobile space. So this is where I sometimes start to question why I've chose mobile, because thinking about dynamic instrumentation and hooking into processes as the phone starts is like beyond what my like memory capacity can do. So Frida is a tool that was created that we use a lot to hook into that app when it starts and manipulate how the app functions at the runtime. I'll first go into Freedom. So Freedom is a open source tool. It utilizes that Frida framework. Basically what it does is you run your application, you do some traffic in it, maybe you transferring some data in between. If it's a banking app, you'll do all that and then you'll run a free dump on it. What that free dump does is it takes your application and runs a system dump of memory, and that will drop it onto your computer. From there, you can get like several different things out of that. I really like it because sometimes it gives you credentials, usernames, even file locations that they didn't mean to leave out there, keys, going back to like email addresses, maybe URLs that you didn't capture in Burp Suite and you found there, IP addresses, and then schemes that you use in the mobile device. So it's kind of another testing area that I like to hit, even if you can't really use it in an audit because it's at runtime. If the user reboots its device, we assume that the information is not going to be there, but and you have to have that physical access to your device, but still kind of neat to see what applications leave, what kind of information gets left in your memory. Okay, so next on the list. So back in the talk, we talked about getting IPA files. So if you were to utilize that app store and pull or download that app onto your phone, you can then use this free.ios dump to pull that decrypted IPA from that phone, from the jailbroken device. So what that is if you want to reverse engineer that IPA, then you can take that and look at all like the binaries, and things will get left out in the folders of the iOS IPA, and it's kind of a more tedious task that I do in the mobile app space. Like if you were just wanting to reverse engineer apps for fun, I would definitely get that installed. But again, I tend to lean more towards Android sometimes because I feel like I can move through it faster. So, all right, so we've talked about free dump and Frida iOS dump. Next, I'm going to move on to objection. So when I first did this talk, I went over Frida and how to use Frida. Now I am more, I guess, into using objection. It has a lot more functionality than Frida, but it does work on the Frida framework. So you need Frida installed on your device. And again, Frida could be, like most of these things, could be one whole talk. I probably could fill a whole hour on how to use Frida. But for the sake of time, you will need Frida on that device, on your Android or iOS, and on your computer for all this to work. So going back to objection. So again, objection supports iOS and Android. Use it to inspect and interact with container file systems, bypass SSL pinning, dump keychains, perform memory-related tasks, and explore and manipulate objects in the heap. So main thing I like using it for, and what I've used for it recently, is the SSL the SSL pinning disable and root disable, but we'll go over that in just a second. So main command that you use for objection will be to objection-G. The process name is going to either be the com.android.bluetooth, or if you have an iOS, you can use like a process ID number. A lot of times with the iOS IPAs, they use just the name. So if you were looking at Facebook, Facebook would be in that quotes. And then you'll hit explore. It will hook. You'll start the app and hook up into the application. And what I mean by hook is hooking into that process when it first starts, the application when it first starts up. So after that, I'm going to go over a couple of Android commands and then a couple iOS commands. So for objection, again, the ones I like using a lot, SSL pinning disable. This is when I can't use Burp Suite on to capture the traffic. I will start up my objection, run the explore command. From there, there'll be a kind of like a command table. I'll type in Android SSL pinning disabled. That will then block that. I guess, how do I explain it? It blocks that process of the app looking to see if you are rooted, and it blocks that cert pinning process. That's what I should say. It blocks the cert pinning process. So it bypasses that and then allows your traffic through. Android root disable, same idea. That also will take that when the application notices that your phone is rooted, it will take that process, it will stop it, and then allow you to run that application. A couple other ones is the Android key store list. So it lists what the Android key store is, and then hooking and searching for classes. This can be beneficial. So I don't have some of the commands up there because I didn't want to go too deep in the woods, but you can take certain processes or certain classes and try to run them without being logged into the app and see if the app will start up and pull you information and data out of that app without you logged in. So pretty cool. But again, I don't want to get too far into objection because I've been doing this for 4 years now. So it's kind of takes a little bit to get that full understanding. So on the iOS side, I did not put SSL pinning, but that was another, you can do SSL pinning on that side. And then I believe the jailbreak detection you can bypass as well. But you can also get NS user defaults. You can do the same thing, hooking and listing classes, credential storage, keychains, and then cookies. So the cookie is kind of neat because sometimes the app will leave cookies in your keychain or cookies in your device that maybe you shouldn't, maybe have too much information. That's something we'll report on if you're doing an audit. So enough with objection. I don't want to like beat that down too much because it's quite an extensive tool. We will move back over to the Android side. So I touched base a little bit on getting APKs. We're going to go back to APK tool. What that is after you've pulled that APK down off the device, you can use a tool like this, and this is going to go ahead and take apart that APK and give you a file folder structure that you can use to look through and do static analysis on that. You will also need, if you're doing that, a good text editor. So I use Sublime. That's if I'm doing any sort of manual static analysis. I don't have the link up, but any sort of text editor that you prefer. Lastly, on the tooling side, for decompiling of apps, I like to use Jadex for Android. I have not used the bottom one, but I gave it as an example. But that again gives you kind of a high level, or more not high level, but detailed level of your application, all the classes, all the code. So if you don't have any code obfuscation, you can see what the developer created in that code or into the app. So this is a pretty good tool for Android. And I'm trying to think what I use for iOS. A lot of times iOS, you just pull the IPA down, and if you have like a MacBook, you can right click and then view the source or view the package details, and that will give you your information, like your detailed code base for your IPA file. And a lot of times, I know I touch base a lot on Android. I use FileZilla. I know it's probably not secure, but I use FileZilla to connect to my Android or my iPhone device, and that's how I look at the iPhone's structure level, similar to the ADB shell in iOS. So I know I kind of scrolled back on further material, and then if you got questions or anything about that, I can always answer that. So talked about text editor, talked about that. Next, some training materials. So training materials for me, I first started, I actually had a coworker that trained me, but I referenced this OWASP mobile security testing guide quite often, just because they are constantly updating it, and it's some of the like really good mobile pen testers out there that are using it and that are updating it. The OWASP mobile top 10 is another resource. Not to talk up trusted sec, but we've got a lot of good blogs out there that I've referenced. And then basically any Google foo that you can do. This is such a new field for everyone that people are constantly adding information out there as we go, and there's classes that you can see popping up in like the cheaper paid for courses. So and then all I have to say is, if you are in a position where somebody asks, hey, do you want to do mobile testing? I would say go for it, because I feel like this is kind of where companies are needing to go, and talk about working in a very niche area. I would definitely suggest moving to mobile pen testing if you get a chance. I sure enjoy it. It's never the same thing over again. It's always new. So, and with that, here's my contact information. So if you want to write that down, that's my email address. I'm on Twitter. But I can open it up for questions, or somebody needs me to go back to a slide.
Whitney, it seems that the questions might be late right now, but we definitely want to thank you for sharing your information on mobile pen testing. Definitely so many different areas to think about there. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's kind of a hard topic to wrangle up in one talk and not go off and squirrel off into several different topics and run over on time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.